All right, scholars, last day for character development, day 5. We're going to finish Pink and Say, and then I'm going to post a quiz for you to see if you have gotten the concept this week. You have done a really, really good job answering my questions, and I love the responses that I'm getting where you give me the response and you provide evidence. So continue to do that. Whatever quiz I give you, make sure that you give me evidence for your answers or you go back in the text and look for it. So last day of character development, I can explain a character's development. What is character development? It is how a character changes from the beginning to the end, and what things or events make that change. So how do we find it? We identify how they feel at the beginning. We then identify how they feel at the end, and we now have the beginning and the end, and we ask ourselves, what in the middle, what events made that change? So at the beginning, blank felt blank, but at the end, they felt blank. He or she changed her mind because, and we need to decide why. That's where your evidence goes, your because part. Good readers, think about how characters develop in order to understand the impact that the events of the story have on the character. So every event in the story has an impact on our character. So right now, we still have Sheldon, or Say, who's scared. He does not want to go to war. And we have Pink. So far, he's been brave and helpful, but now Momo Bay, his parent, has been killed. So we are going to see some development here throughout. We put you in there, why you be staying here, Pink cried as he rocked her in his arms. His eyes were looking in a faraway place as he closed them. Your son loves you, Momo Bay. Your son loves you, he sobbed as he kissed her. So Momo Bay is no longer alive. After we buried her under a willow tree, we set out. Pink figured we were a 3 days' walk from Union troops. He watched the movement of the sun. Her words still rang in my heart, her words about being brave. My steps were as sure now as they had ever been since the war started. We walked in the open as clear as a country stroll until the morning of the second day. Then we knew we were being followed. So at this point, we're seeing a little bit of character development from Say. He's walking very sure. He's got sure-footed, so he's not as scared. He's remembering what Momo Bay had told him. So at first he was scared, but then because of what Momo Bay told him, he's starting to feel more sure of himself. Take these, Pink said as he took his spectacles from his pocket. If they catch me with them, they'll be in trouble for sure. When they caught up to us, one yelled at me, "Where are you going with that darky boy?" I was afraid to answer because of my northern accent. It would dead sure give us away. "Boy, what outfit you part of?" the leader barked. I couldn't answer. "You Union boy?" one jeered as he pulled my uniform from my knapsack. "No, I ain't no Yankee. I got that from a dead one," I sputtered, trying to convince them. That was when we were grabbed. My words had given us away. We were prisoners of the Confederate Army. We were held in a barn that night. Pink shivered with fever. I held him as he had done before for me. So they went away and they were trying to go catch up to continue fighting, but they got captured by the Confederate Army. The next morning, we were thrown into a boxcar. We rode with what seemed 2 days, stopping many times. When the door slid open, the daylight was blinding. We were loaded into a buckboard and taken through town. The townsfolk looked hard at us. All they had left for us was a mean looks and a heap of hate. We jarred to a stop in front of gates that marked the entrance to the stockade. "It says Andersonville," Pink whispered. My heart stopped. I heard of this place. It was one of the worst Confederate camps. So Pink was so brave and helpful all along, and I feel like he's still kind of being brave. He still is showing those things, but now Say is starting to have to help out because Pink has a fever and Pink isn't able to do as much, so Say can't be scared anymore. When we were pulled from the buckboard, we fell hard to the ground. "No, no," I begged as they pulled us both along. Because of his fever, Pink stumbled and fell. They dragged him along with such meanness. He did not protest until they forced us in different directions. Then he reached for me and said, "Let me touch the hand that touched Mr. Lincoln, say, just one last time." So at this spot, this spot has a huge impact on Pink. He was trying to shake Say's hand, which shook the hand of President Lincoln. This event is really significant because it connects Pink to something significant. He physically connects him to his friend. So we're kind of starting to see Pink waver a little bit. He's a little bit more nervous, but we're starting to see Say become more brave. It says he's screaming no, no, and he's begging to them. The old Pink, the scared Say would have just not said anything and just let it happen. But he has definitely started to change. I watched tears fill his eyes and cleaved my hand into his until they wrenched us apart. This smote him and dragged him away from me. He looked back at me and tried to say something more, but they crossed his back with knotted hemp and pushed him along. So his eyes are filling with tears. So I'm seeing Pink. His bravery is faltering a little bit because not only did they kill Momo Bay, but now they captured him and they're dragging him away from Say, so he doesn't have his friend anymore. So his bravery is changing based on those events. Sheldon Russell Curtis was released from Andersonville Prison some months later, weighing no more than 78 pounds. Andersonville was built to hold only 10,000 prisoners, but by the end of the war, it held 33,000 soldiers. There was no fresh water, no shelter, and no food. 13,000 men and boys died of starvation and dysentery. Sheldon Curtis returned to his home and recovered. He settled in Berlin Township in Saranac, Michigan. He married Abigail N. Barnard and fathered 7 children. He became a grandfather and great-grandfather during his long lifetime. He died a very old man in 1924. So if we're stopping here, we're thinking about how did Say develop throughout the story. So at the beginning, Say was injured and very, very scared. But in the end, he was brave enough to survive the war and his time in prison. Sorry, something popped up on my screen. So at the beginning, he was scared and injured, but in the end, he was brave enough to survive the war and his time in prison. Say changed after his time with Pink and Momo Bay because they saved him, they healed him, and they taught him to be brave. So if we're talking about this, at the beginning, Say felt scared, but at the end, he felt brave. He changed his mind. So what events made him change his mind? He changed his mind because of the time that he spent with Momo Bay and Pink, and that they made him brave. All right, let's finish up. Let's see what happened to Pink. So we know what happened to Say. Let's see what happened to Pink. Pincus Ailey never returned home. For him, there was to be no wife, no children, nor grandchildren to remember him. It was told that he was hanged within hours after he was taken into Andersonville. His body was thrown into a lime pit. So at this point, we can think Pink didn't really have a chance to develop. He was brave and helpful at the beginning of the story, and then as the story went on, he became a little bit more scared. Doesn't necessarily mean he wasn't brave, but because he died, he did not have the chance to really develop throughout the story. He was murdered at the prison almost immediately after his separation with Say, which meant he didn't have the time to develop. I know this story to be true because Sheldon Russell Curtis told his daughter Rosa. Rosa Curtis Stowell told it to her daughter Estella. Estella Stowell Barber, in turn, told it to her son William. He then told me his daughter Patricia. When my father finished this story, he put out his hand and said, "This is the hand that has touched the hand that has touched the hand that shook the hand of Abraham Lincoln." So Pink's legacy was remembered a little bit because the author's great-great-great-granddaughter, the author was Say's great-great-great-granddaughter, and the story's been told and retold to remember the legacy of Pincus Ailey. The story always ends with the shaking of a relative shaking Abraham Lincoln's hand. So every time these families tell the story, so this is a true story. This book serves as a written memory to Pincus Ailey, since there are no living descendants to do this for him. When you read this book, before you put this book down, say his name out loud and vow to remember him always. So always remember Pincus Ailey. So this is a true story, and the character is developed. It's not just a character, it's a real person who developed throughout the story. So we talked about character development a lot this week, and we remember that character development, we have to figure out, how did the character feel at the beginning? How did the character feel at the end? And what events, what evidence made the character change? So today I'm going to give you a little bit of a passage that you need to read, and then you are going to write me a short couple of sentences, paragraph, that tells me how did your character feel at the beginning, how did your character feel at the end, and what made them feel that way. You can use this right here. You can pause it and kind of zoom in a little bit. Here, I'll move it up a little bit so you can see it. You can pause the video, but it says, at the beginning, blank felt blank, but at the end, they felt blank. He or she changed his or her mind because, and that's what you're going to do. So we've became better readers today by determining, actually this whole week, by determining character development and explaining how they've developed. Great job this week, guys, and continue. Next week, we will talk about a different skill. I think it's explaining evidence, not for sure, though. Have a good night.